Greetings, fellow fans of Star Trek, and welcome to Captain's Yacht. As we depart planet Earth for the 24th century, a few things to point out. Don't forget to tune in to the last part of each video, in which Scholar Beta and me, Captain Kanaka, will issue a special kind of Star Trek assignment for you all. All you gotta do is submit it through the comments, and who knows, you might get a special A+ commendation. With that said, let's board the Captain's Yacht and see what we're talking about today.
Wow, so we just went on a deep dive of, what kind of was the development history of Picard, right? So I'm going to go actually back to the premise again, start with that, and then we'll get into what works. So if you recall, we were saying the premise was Picard is working on his family vineyard, now retired from Starfleet, and he's thrust back into the action when Daj, a mysterious young woman, visits him begging for his help. Unfortunately, she is killed in that opening episode. And then the rest of the series the rest of the first season examines Picard searching for her identical twin, Soji, and helping her find her hidden homeworld before the Romulans do. So that's the premise. That's what after 20-some years, after TNG, after all these attempts at reboots, after all these attempts at films and pitches, from Bryan Singer on down the line, that's what we ended up with. So, Captain, I'm actually going to have you start. What do you think works with Season 1 of Picard?
So, I want to start out by saying Captain Picard is a very special character to me. Longtime viewers of the show know that I'm on the autistic spectrum and was nonverbal for many years and only became verbal after mimicking characters on the show. Specifically Picard. So much of Picard impacts my psyche and how I operate on a daily basis. And the cornerstone of his character is diplomacy. So I want to be diplomatic here. I have extremely strong views for this episode, this show rather, and the episode we're doing. But in the interest of diplomacy and the spirit of Jean-Luc Picard, it finally broke the Nemesis barrier for me. I absolutely hated Nemesis. I hated it when it came out. We can explore that at a bigger time. And my biggest gripe with the show is that I hated the way it handled Picard and the crew of the Enterprise and just hanging there with nowhere else to go. It's a cliffhanger there. So many questions needed to be answered and they weren't. And I went through all the stages of grief when that happened. And yes. I got acceptance there eventually. But one thing I can applaud Picard for is it's not the unabashed fan service that what Star Trek Federation, the movie, the Avengers movie, basically would have been. It would have been fun to see. I just would like to see it out of morbid curiosity, but that's just me.
Yeah, it's kind of like how I'd like to see Stanley Kubrick's version of Lord of the Rings featuring the Beatles. You ever hear about that? Failed project that never got off the ground. I'd love to see that, but not at the expense of PJ's Lord of the Rings that came out, in 99, 2001, whenever that was. No way, I definitely want to keep, probably 2001, I think is when Lord of the Rings came out. But yeah, morbid curiosity, I know what you mean.
Definitely morbid curiosity there. So, maybe one of these days, maybe we'll do an episode on it. Maybe we can find the script and examine it. That'd be phenomenal. So,
yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's do a 90-minute Nemesis review, too, where we're not diplomatic.
I'm looking forward
I would
to
love that. Okay, keep going, my friend.
Brief words to our audience, folks. What we're planning on doing, after we're done with this, we're going to go back and finish our review of Season 1 of Next Generation, giving assignments out and whatnot. So with that said, if you folks would like, between our reviews of Season 1 and Season 2, if you want us to review Nemesis or Generations or First Contact, whatever, or do a Lost Worlds of Star Trek episode, we can definitely do that. This is up to you folks. You give us assignments, we give you assignments. So
hey, that's how it should be, isn't it? That's a little, I like that. Okay.
Good deal. So
where were we? I'm sorry, I got us off track. Where were we?
No, it's all good. So in the end, for better or worse, Picard answers questions that I had waited almost 20 years for answers. What happens to Picard after Nemesis? Did he retire? Did he go, at what point did he retire? What would retirement for Picard look like? I was always under the impression that he would try to be useful and do like an encore career. Maybe he stopped being a captain, but he did something else. That question was answered, for better or worse. It was. Did Riker and Troy start a family? That was answered. Patrick Stewart joked about it in interviews for the movie. His facial suggestions indicate that his facial expressions rather indicate that they might have been too old, but not only did they have one kid, they had two.
Yeah.
Did the data before memory transfer work? There were hints at the end of Nemesis that it did. Also, what happened between the Federation and the Romulan Empire after Shinzon? It's answered. More recently, since a part of Star Trek 2009 takes place in the 24th century, what was the degree of Picard's agencies to the event that sent Nero back in time? I would have loved to have seen that. I would have loved that to be explored more. I know there is a comic to Star Trek 09, a prequel comic that explains what Picard and the Next Gen crew were doing. Ironically, Alex Kurtzman has a writing credit on it.
Yep.
But I will maintain Star Trek is never properly canon until you see it on screen. Just saying. And there were many decisions that were made in this show that essentially decanonized that comic. So that's what's good for me. You and I had a laugh about this. Originally, this part in the script says Picard does a good job Patrick Stewart does a good job at Picard. And then I realized the error of my ways and said, Patrick Stewart does a solid performance. Parentheses, not necessarily as Picard though. So why did you take issue with the original draft that said Patrick Stewart does a good job as Picard?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, audience, it's hard to keep all my, some of my ideas, into the simple divisions of what works and what doesn't, because, obviously when we're critiquing art, there's way more stuff in the middle, and so, this is kind of in the middle for me. I love Patrick Stewart. I think he does a great job. I think Jerry Ryan does a great job. I think even Spiner, for a tiny little bit he's there, I buy it, I think the crew I have no issue with, but I'm just really wondering if they thought about who this character Jean-Luc Picard is. So I was thinking about, I guess, who Picard is as a character, and I was thinking, man, they had 176 episodes and 4 movies to set this character up, right? And we know a ton about him. Go look at the Memory Alpha page on Picard. It's longer than most real life historical figures. Seriously, it is. There is so much there. I don't deny the acting talent of Sir Patrick at all, but I just feel he really isn't playing Picard. And I want to just really quickly look at a couple levels of characterization. Some that they hit, and some that they don't. So the most basic level of characterization, what I call level 1. We know he's a bald captain. We know he likes tea. We know he likes Shakespeare. We know he likes archaeology. We know he's not a family man, nor does he have children, nor is he really fond of them. And we also know that he was once assimilated by the Borg and went by the designation Locutus. Now, I think most, casual to recurring fans of the series know that, right? Just like maybe they know Spock is logical, has pointy ears, and Kirk is kind of a bad boy. I don't know. They know that surface layer stuff. Then more fans are going to know, deeper fans are going to understand the level 2 characterization. He's dedicated his entire life to Starfleet. He believes intensely in its core values and challenges the ranks above him when they don't live up to those values. He beats his foes with speeches that articulate these values, charisma over strength. He conferences with his staff. He gets their input on important matters, inclusion over hierarchical authority for him, right? And this is where I think they just really lost Picard's character. Picard retired from Starfleet instead of standing up to them when they refused to help evacuate the Romulans? Really? That's what Picard did? That was his choice? Mm-hmm. To me, I don't think so, man. I don't think that's how that works. Remember when just 2 movies ago, he said, be dang, I don't care about the Federation Council. I'm going to do what I want to do and defy this Admiral's orders in the name of helping these indigenous people. So, like, I don't know. To that level of characterization, they seem to have completely missed too. Also, the importance of his crew and getting input from them and recommendations, suggestions. Those are like my favorite parts of his character because it's, and we know this as teachers, there's a tendency to want to stand up there and run the whole class yourself. But the more people you include in the design or the processes or the execution of the lesson, the better it is. Inclusion, that's what he's about. That's what this character is about, man.
Amen.
Okay, and so, like, okay, a last little point on this. And so I feel like they got some level 1 stuff, right? And then they totally missed level 2. Now, level 3 is what the real fan, not the real fans, that's a horrible thing to say, is what the long-term fans, y'all know about this level 3 stuff. And this level 3 stuff is Picard maybe, probably loves his dead best friend's wife, but not her kid. You know what I'm saying? I know we can laugh at that, but that is the most subtle part of his character, that he is probably in love with Beverly Crusher. He has no idea how to express it. He ordered her husband to his death, but somehow she can get over that many years later and can have a relationship with him. But the problem really is that kid. And so honestly, that brings all levels of characterization together, and I love that about 176 episodes of this show, developing that. And so here's my bottom line. I promise, Captain, I'm going to turn it back over to you, but my bottom line is, a lot of this stuff does not show up. And that I totally accept the idea that characters can change. Yes, if they didn't change, that would be boring. But look how long it took to set this up. It took over 7 seasons and 4 movies to set this up. Why would you throw it all out? This is excellent stuff to work with. I don't understand why they just felt the need to jettison level 2 and 3 characterization and just decide, what we're going to do? We're going to go with something totally different. So this did start in the movies. To Alex Kurtzman's defense, like, they started messing with his character.
Oh, yeah.
Generations, definitely First Contact, it was a different person, a different person. So yeah, what do you think, my friend? I'm sorry, I just went on
no worries. And given your literary background, your analysis is right on the money. For the record, I am willing to give. I don't disagree with you on how they did Picard dirty in the movies. But I am willing to give First Contact a pass for a very specific reason, and we can discuss it when we get to whenever we get to review that movie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But I do agree, they definitely did Picard dirty, and this is the apex of doing Picard dirty. There is a historical thesis, and you kind of touched on this, Scholar Beta, that says we've never gotten proper Picard since Generations. Definitely First Contact, but at least Generations. Operating under those rules, we haven't gotten level 3 or level 2 Picard back at all, but we've gotten close. And one thing I do want to point out where they did get close, legitimately close, under those new parameters is the scene where Picard reminisces about Data and explains his relationship with Data to Soji. With that in mind, that is something where, okay, you got about 7 hours worth of film, and that 2 to 3 minutes is good. Honorable mention, yep.
Sorry, that's hilarious.
Yeah, I know, right? But being diplomatic in the spirit of my great mentor, that is good acting on the criteria that it's close to Picard, or as close to Picard as the show's ever gonna get. Honorable mention is that quasi-TV interview he had in the pilot, in which he vociferously explains why he made his decisions. I don't agree with those decisions, but it's something Picard adjacent. There's something where it's so bad it's good. There are parts of this show in which I laughed out loud, and not in an intentional way. The humor setup perhaps is not as intentional as they want it to be. There's a scene in the episode Stardust City Rag where Patrick Stewart just completely ignores everything about Picard.
Yep.
and just talks like a pirate.
Once they get the Borg inside them, there is no coming back, no matter what they think. Defiled is what you are. Damned, cursed.
And that episode is a terrible Star Trek episode for so many reasons. But on the other hand, it's so bad it's good. So credit where credit is due. Patrick Stewart seems like he's having fun. I had fun by proxy. But again, and I definitely appreciate your perspective on that, Scholar Beta, where we've never gotten full Picard, and we definitely don't have full Picard here, but we get close. Another thing that I think is good, considering the broader landscape of television, because this has been something longtime viewers of the show will know, I approach things more from a historical background and examining the show in context of how movies are made, shows are made, etc. This is not a straight up Next Generation reboot or a revival. It's an attempt to continue the story. So when this show was announced, which was at the same time of my wedding, I always remember that. That's what made the day perfect. I married my wife. I love my wife. This is a great thing. And then the little cherry on top was Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart, announcing that he's going to come back as Picard. And considering how much that man means to me, that character rather, that made it absolutely perfect. I am proud to say that the show, my marriage has fared exponentially better than the show has, but that being said, I hesitated on that joke a little bit, but I wanted to point out two things happened that day. Two things started that day. The show sucks, but the other thing that happened that day to me has gotten that monumentally better. I absolutely love it. But with that in mind, Patrick Stewart, even back when he announced it, emphatically said that Picard might not be a captain.
Jean-Luc Picard is back. However, I have to tell you, he may not, and I stress may not, be a captain anymore.
Despite him emphatically saying that, so many people, even colleagues of ours, Scholar Beta, said, "Are you excited for the Star Trek Next Generation reboot?" Suggesting that they're giving Next Generation the Roseanne or Arrested Development treatment, where they bring everybody back, they throw out catchphrases, it's what you remember before. It's not that. I am glad it's not that. What are your opinions on that, Scholar Beta?
Yeah, on the one hand, I am very glad that they didn't, bust these actors out, CGI de-age or make up them to death, and then throw them on the bridge and, say, do your thing. I'm very glad for that. I am grateful. Despite my love for them, I just don't think that story is one I really want to see. We did, or like I've said over and over again, we've already seen 7 seasons of this crew and 4 movies. But here's the thing. However, if they said, okay, Alex Kurtzman, you can reboot, but you got to use the cast, which they would never say. But if they did say that, there's so many ways they could have used these actors, and it's a big galaxy. And it's not just full of starships. I don't know if anyone's ever seen Deep Space Nine or any of the other television shows, but it's not just about being on the bridge of a starship. At some point, it could be other things. And when we reveal our rewrites and our edits, I will explain how you can use a character over the age of 70 in a movie and have it be good, and you don't have to make it action nonsense. Because, like we've alluded with Picard in the First Contact film, when he basically strips off into his, his tank top and he's swinging around engineering with the Borg green gas floating everywhere that eats flesh, that's just goofy. It just kind of breaks it a little bit. And I know he wants to be Bruce Willis, kind of diehard action, but I mean, there's other things you can do. And I just think, when I am grateful that they didn't put him on the bridge, but I'm just saying, if that was the only idea you could come up with, you are not a very creative person. That's all I got to say. If the only thing you can think of is we got to put people on a bridge and make them say words, no, like catchphrases, nah, I don't have any idea. And for the record, I never saw the Roseanne or the Arrested Development reboot. I have no idea if they're trash or not. I had no idea.
If you want to know my beliefs on the Roseanne and Arrested Development reboots, leave a comment in the leave a comment. We'll talk about it, because I could get on a digression, but I no. So
Yes. Let's
with
move
that said, this is not a revival for the sake of nostalgia, and that's the most important thing here. There are legitimate stories to be told without cashing in too much on callbacks. Now, you have a comment on this, Scholar Beta, but and I agree.
Move on.
Go ahead.
I
Okay,
was just
so
gonna say, let's move on, because I already made my point about the premise being, when all is said and done, my just comment is that, yeah, it is a new series, but the premise is really simple.
yes.
It's not like ultra complicated or anything like that. But that's fine. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. And I think that's a positive that they honestly went with kind of a searching plot. I think that could have worked well, but a little boring, honestly. And we'll talk about that when we talk about all the plots that are going on, because it could
Definitely.
be exciting, but I just think it gets bogged down in too many other conflicting plots.
Definitely. So the creative choice of not making Picard a captain potentially expands storytelling possibilities and gives a different look at Picard's psyche in the concluding years of his life. That's the thing. This is why it's one of those things where I really wanted to love this show on the premise alone.
Yes.
Something different, something involving a character, something I absolutely love, but too much of the fundamentals break down to, from my perspective, make me enjoy it. Now, one final thing to talk about before we get into our assignment for this portion of our time together is the production office and the people behind the camera. Longtime viewers of this show will know, specifically in our critiques, that there are monocultures out there. Only one culture being represented as a template for the entire species the Enterprise comes across.
Yes.
Scholar Beta, you pointed out that despite Star Trek having progressive views, its representation and its approach, rather, in episodes that are problematic by modern standards, like Code of Honor, Haven, and Angel One, are indications of, to use your terms, the writer's subconscious or the production staff's subconscious. And I think that, coming from a psychological background myself, I think that's a very apt way of putting it. The fantasy of the same, I think I'm paraphrasing that. Yes, Scholar Beta.
Yeah, I just want to point out that phrase. I love that phrase, the fantasy of the same. That's N.K. Jemisin from her essay, How Long Till Black Future Month. Great essay if you haven't read it. It's online. You can check it out on her website. But yeah, that's where I got that phrase from. Just want to give her credit because she's an amazing writer. And she rightfully pointed that out. And I hadn't even thought about that until I read her thing, or her piece. So brilliant piece.
Very, very well stated on all scores there. Definitely indicating a blind spot in the diversity of the writing staff, but that trend
historically, yes.
Historically, yes. But I'm happy to say that trend may be ending soon. Picard is more diverse in terms of showrunners and producers. Hanelle Culpepper directed 3 episodes of Star Trek Picard, including the pilot, and is stated as executive producer for 3 episodes. So, considering Star Trek has always been a more white dominated production staff, that kind of inclusion is very much important. What are your opinions on that, Scholar Beta?
I think that's a big milestone. If you do look at the people that they trot out, Michael Chabon, Alex Kurtzman, Patrick Stewart, the people they trot out, Jerry Ryan, to be the face of this, they're pretty white, still. But regardless of that, you're absolutely right. There is a lot going on behind the scenes that, the casual viewer may not necessarily, or the person who hasn't watched, the last 6 iterations of this franchise, they might not know about, including that even though Gene Roddenberry wanted to put a diverse cast in front of the camera, and believed in that we had moved on from segregation or racism and stuff like that, and wanted to show that the people behind the camera, not the same thing. So I agree with you, and I think that is a very positive development. And there's this thing that I've been working on with my students, the difference between diversity and inclusion. And I can't get, there's this group that we work with at school called Passion Impact, and they are the ones that came up with this metaphor. They're incredible. They said that diversity, that's having a seat at the table, but inclusion is actually having the ability to help construct and design the table. You know what I'm saying? And I love that idea. To me, classic Trek is kind of diversity, but maybe we're getting now more towards a little more inclusion in the writing and the creation of these stories. So I think that's fascinating, and let's see where it goes.
And I'm looking forward to discussing that, especially because I took that concept that you talked about in our character development. So next episode, next big episode, we're going to definitely talk about that. So with that said, we're going to get into our assignment for this section. So here is your assignment.
Captain, can I say one more thing on that? I'm sorry to interrupt it. Just
go
one
right
more
ahead.
If, I'm not saying that there aren't white writers out there who cannot write diverse characters. Absolutely not. Of course you can. Of course you can. However, I still think that inclusion piece and allowing a larger, more inclusive writing staff to see the characters that are presented on the screen can only make it better, can only make it truer, realer, that's just my feeling, so just wanted to add that last thought on there. Back to the assignment.
Awesome. And for the record, I am going to, I bring up something like that for character construction next big episode. I'm really looking forward to that. So here's your assignment for today's section. Pitch your own follow-up to Star Trek Nemesis in the comments, focusing on what loose end or loose ends from Nemesis you would like tied up. So very quickly, here's my version of this assignment. I would really love to see, and if you take a look at the description, I have a link to this because I'm in the process right now of completely rewriting the whole show, and I'm 3 episodes into it. And episode 1 is, as I said, it's available in the description below in the link. But I would really love to see a Star Trek Nemesis sequel / Star Trek 09 prequel explaining the events that tied the 2 films together. And that's what I was expecting a little bit in terms of what Star Trek Picard would be. I know there's potential political reasons or economic reasons, legal reasons as to why that didn't happen, but I would have loved to have seen that. And the way I've written, and I'm curious to see what you, the audience, what your opinion is on this, is having an episode or some sort of connective tissue between those 2 events. So that's my pitch. What's your pitch, Scholar Beta?
Imagine a 4-part Netflix exclusive miniseries where Picard must work as a Federation Council member, no longer a captain, to deal with the aftermath of the Dominion War. A newly anointed Kira Nerif chafes with Picard, Ambassador Picard, Council Member Picard, whatever he is in this, as he works in absence of Benjamin Sisko, the emissary of the Prophets, who has not been seen in 3 years. I want my Deep Space Nine movie, but I don't want it just a movie. I'll take a miniseries. I'll take 4 hours of Deep Space Nine, 5 hours of Deep Space Nine movie. But that's what the Dominion War is a big deal. We put a lot of time and effort into that. That was one of the original multi-season arcs from Trek. And I'm a little sour on the fact that it made Star Trek so dark and so violent. However, if this show would be great if we could then get back to that utopia thing. Let's rebuild the Gamma, or let's help them. There's so much going on. How do we make the Jem'Hadar not addicted to Ketracel White? What do we do with the Porta? Are we gonna do some type of trial with the changelings and make sure they don't react? There's so many good questions. So I want my proper Deep Space Nine treatment, and I'm gonna start with Picard as his way of getting into that and trying to help out as a Federation Council member. But I think Kira and company really take over after that, and the search for Ben Sisko, and is he coming back? I'd tease that until the very end, and then of course I'd bring Avery Brooks back because he's amazing. Let's go. So yeah, I'm sorry, I took a long time to explain it. This is my favorite assignment of the 3 you came up with. I love it.
I love this, and that's great. I want to see your show. I think, and maybe for those of you who are in the audience, make a poster for that. That could be a second assignment. There you go.
I'll make a poster for that. Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, you'll make a poster for that. Awesome. So with that in mind, just a reminder to you, the audience, post your assignments in the comments. Scholar Beta and I will review and give A+ commendations at the beginning of our next big episode. So remember, episode 0.1 if you're watching this via Light, to see if you get a shout out. So, with that in
audience,
mind, go
just
ahead.
remember, we're teachers and we do a lot of grading already. And if we're willing to grade this project, that means we're definitely into it. You know?
Definitely.
Just, hey, anyone who's out there who's a future teacher, you're thinking about getting into this, remember, what you assign, you grade. So just keep that in mind. You don't have to assign boring stuff. You don't have to. You can assign interesting things that you actually want to look at. It took me like 3 years to figure that out.
Words to live by, my friend. This is Captain Kanaka speaking. On behalf of my esteemed colleague at Scholar Beta, we hope you've enjoyed this deluxe version of Captain's Yacht, a Star Trek podcast. This is a podcast done by two inner-city high school teachers learning how to make a podcast so we can teach those skills to our students in the fields of social studies and English language arts. If you like what you see and like to see more, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as both me, Captain Kanaka, and my colleague Scholar Beta are new to the podcasting realm and the video production realm, please give us any feedback you deem appropriate. We could definitely use it. So, with that said, live long and prosper, e malama pono, and see you next time.